Welcome back to the program. You want to join us? You can hit us up via Twitter at Boxtorow, BOXTOROW, or on Facebook, BOX2ROW. In the next segment, going to be joined by Jackson State head football coach TC Taylor. A little bit later on in the program, going to be joined by former Grambling offensive lineman, HBCU All-American, now offensive lineman for the Washington Commanders, Trent Scott, here on the program. So taking a look at week 6, there are a couple of really intriguing games, especially in the CIAA. And it's interesting because you're through 5 weeks now of football. And when I look in the SIAC, there aren't many intriguing games. As a matter of fact, you've got like Albany State's on a nice little bit of a winning streak here. They won the Rams, the Golden Rams have won a couple of games here in a row. So it'll be interesting to see if the Golden Rams can keep that win streak up against Allen in Columbia, South Carolina. But really, I mean, there aren't a lot of great games, I think, overall. This week in the CIAA, there are some really good matchups that I think will go a long way to determining the champion in the CIAA. Remember, no more divisions. So now you have a situation where, the best 2 teams will play in the championship game. When that happens, you kind of open yourself up to coin flips and who beat this team and all of those kinds of things, because really in the CIAA, there's a lot of parity right now. I mean, Johnson C. Smith is undefeated, obviously, but you've got to, Virginia Union, Virginia Union is going to rebound. And let me back up. So you got Johnson C. Smith undefeated. Winston-Salem State has been a very pleasant surprise. 4-1 on the season. Only loss was to A&T. Took A&T to overtime in Greensboro. So you've got a Winston-Salem State team that is playing some really good football right now. Speaking of Winston-Salem State, you talk about putting Winston-Salem State to the test. Well, the Rams are going to Richmond to take on Virginia Union, the defending CIAA champs. This could be any number of things. Could be a preview to the CIAA championship game. Very well could be. We got a lot of football left to play. Johnson C. Smith currently undefeated. I'm going to talk about the Golden Bulls a little bit later on. But I think when you look at this Winston-Salem State team, this is going to be a true test. Not that the other games weren't, but this is going to be a tough matchup. You're talking about a well-coached Virginia Union team who has one of the best running backs in the country in Jada Byers. I'm going to be interested to see, because Winston-Salem State is pretty good up front in terms of putting pressure on the quarterback and stopping the run. I'm interested to see how the Rams do against that Virginia Union offensive line, which is solid, and against a guy like a Jada Byers. And then the other game in the CIAA is Johnson C. Smith and Virginia State. That game is in Charlotte. It's a home game for Johnson C. Smith. Look, Johnson C. Smith, a couple of weeks ago, very much tested. I think Johnson C. Smith has been tested. The Golden Bulls are playing so well right now. You talk about from the quarterback position, the wide receiver position. You talk about on the defensive side of the football, like Johnson C. Smith is playing as well. Obviously, if you're undefeated, but I'm just saying, on both sides of the football, as complete a team as there is in HBCU football. And you're talking about a Virginia State team that kind of got off to the slow start, but is coming off a win, got back into the win column on last week. And so that's going to be a really good football game as well. Again, in Charlotte, there's a lot of buzz in Charlotte around Johnson C. Smith. I remember for years, Johnson C. Smith was kind of dormant. There was no thought about Johnson C. Smith football. Basketball's a different story, but no really thought. And now, you've got a team that's undefeated, and it's the only team in HBCU football that has won every game in which it has played. So I think, that's going to be a really, really good test, really, for both teams. But I mean, if you're Johnson C. Smith, you want to keep that ball rolling and keep being or remaining undefeated in overall, certainly amongst with respect to your schedule. So the game of the week, I think, is Florida A&M at Alabama State. You're talking about a Florida A&M team that now has had a couple of byes. So, Florida A&M on the season has had a couple of byes to this point. Didn't play last week because of the hurricane, and was scheduled to play Alabama A&M. That game has been moved to the end of the season. I look at this Florida A&M team. I'm interested to see because the Rattlers have lost the last two ball games with byes coming in those previous weeks also. So that's interesting to me, and I wonder how FAMU is going to respond, particularly against an Alabama State team that had a nice victory over Bethune-Cookman last week. I mean, you could say, Alabama State had to hold on. Not really. I mean, I think it was 26-22, I think, was the score. Alabama State won, but I think the score was closer than the game indicated. Alabama State got out to the quick lead and it was never really close. Daniel Richardson, the quarterback, has played extremely well so far this season. You look at his numbers, 6 touchdowns to 1 interception. I mean, he's completing 67% of his passes. Those are absolutely outstanding numbers. But he's going up against a really, really good Alabama State defense. Not only an Alabama State defense that's good as a whole, but has some really good individual players as well that are really, really good. You look at Rico Dozier, the linebacker. You got a couple of all-conference, linebackers or all-conference linebacker, all-conference defensive lineman, and then all-conference players in the secondary. And to me, one of the concerns, if I'm the Rattlers, and has to be a concern for Coach Colsey, has to be the lack of a ground game so far this year for Florida A&M, averaging less than 90 yards rushing as a team. I think that's an issue coming into this game against Alabama State because, I think I think Richardson's going to have some success in terms of being able to throw the football because he has all season long. But in this scenario against a defense like that, you've got to be able to also establish the run because Alabama State, in the on the back end is very solid on the back end. So I think that's an issue for certainly for Florida A&M coming into this game. Look at it from the other side of the football. And when I look at Florida A&M, certainly from a defensive standpoint, it's also a team that's giving up a lot of yards. Now, I realize they played a couple of FBS opponents. A lot of those yards were given up against Miami. But from a numbers perspective, giving up a bunch of yards, I know that's got to be a concern for Coach Colsey. Now, if I look on the other side of the football with respect to Alabama State, from in terms of being able to really pass the football, and you thought that the Hornets had the quarterback coming in with Andrew Body. Obviously, he's out for the season. Zach Sims was the guy last week, threw a touchdown pass, didn't throw an interception, and the Hornets only threw 12 passes. But again, I look at the rushing for Alabama State against Bethune-Cookman, and I realize Bethune-Cookman is struggling right now. But Alabama State ran the football for 300 and some yards. I think even though in the SWAC, we've known the SWAC to have aerial attacks, you still have to be able to establish the run. Alabama State, I think, has proven it can, and I think will establish the run against Florida A&M. While on the other side, Florida A&M has not been able to establish the run, and I think that's where there's going to be the difference in the football game. That said, it is a home game for Alabama State. And I know, look, I think you're going to have a good crowd. Alabama State fans are going to come out and support. You're going to get some Florida A&M fans that are going to make the drive. I don't think it's a terribly long drive. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that are going to make the drive to Montgomery for this football game. I like Alabama State in the game because Alabama State is going to do a better job of establishing the run. And I think while Richardson's been hot, and I think he's not, he's not going to slow down in this football game. I think it's going to be Alabama State's defense is going to be enough to be able to help lead the Hornets to a victory. Your thoughts? You can hit me up via Twitter at Boxtorow, BOXTOROW, and give me your thoughts on who you think will win the Florida A&M and Alabama State game. Again, we've got a number of different games on the Week 6 schedule, and to find out about those games, you can log on to boxtorow.com and get the entire schedule.